And I have an exciting guest to join me today. Shaun Bank, the CEO from ImagineX, is here with me. Good morning, Shaun.
Morning, Troy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for pointing out, the misadventure in LinkedIn scheduling. That would have been kind of fun to meet at 4 a.m. Well, not so much. So we'll watch for that. But thank you for joining this morning live. I appreciate it tremendously. We got a chance to meet because I work for Thirdera, and we have a couple select partners, and so Thirdera have partnered with ImagineX. And we've got some exciting things coming up. And so I'm so thankful we got the time to meet. But if you kind of start off with just an intro about ImagineX and about yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Troy. My name is Shaun again. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of ImagineX Consulting. We are a 6-year-old boutique cybersecurity technology consultancy. Our mission is to help our customers and our consultants be better. And the way we do this is by helping our customers make sense of cybersecurity by implementing pragmatic cybersecurity processes and tools. And it is a time in our world where this topic continues to come up. It is starting to permeate our lives. And it's been really an interesting time to be in this industry.
Oh, for sure. I've joked about that in the past too. It's like I've done lots of different technology work, but the popular press has never cared about the stuff I've been involved in. But with cyber, it definitely has. I love that comment about making sense of cyber. Tell me a little bit about that and kind of where that phrase came from and how you've seen that play out with some of your clients, because I think it's unique.
Yeah. What we're seeing, obviously, in the industry, you read the news stories. There are huge breaches at large companies, at small companies. There are ransomware attacks. Cybersecurity has really come to the forefront of the technology agenda. The CIO can no longer, ignore cybersecurity. The CISO
kind of relegated. Those other guys will think about cybersecurity for me.
Yeah. In the past, right? I've been in technology consulting for over 20 years, and in the past, security was always an afterthought, right? It was very much focused on IT development and IT operations and infrastructure, and security just never had a seat at the table. The concept of a chief information security officer was really not even considered as a C-level position until most recently. And in the past few years, the CISO is really critical in decisions crossing the company, right? The CIO cannot ignore security issues, and it has to be built into their processes, their IT processes, and how they build software, how they deliver their products to the market, and how they support their products as well as their infrastructure. So it is now something that cannot be ignored. There is a massive amount of risk associated with it, and so this is the time where a lot of CIOs are now bombarded with a massive amount of information, right? They have to secure their devices. They have to secure their networks. They have to secure their operating systems. They have to think about their applications that live in their data centers. If they are in the cloud, they have to think about security on the cloud. They have to think about access and the folks that are connecting to their network. They have to think about malware and ransomware and phishing attempts, and all these things have led. It is a long list, and it can be overwhelming, especially with the propagation of all the cybersecurity tools that are out there, right? So what we've seen in the past several years is CIOs have been very quickly implementing products to try to shore up the gaps in their cybersecurity programs. And what this has led to is a wealth of data. And the problem with a lot of data, it's a flood. It's an avalanche, right? It's a tsunami of data coming from different cybersecurity sources. There's vulnerability data, there's endpoint data, and CISOs, even experienced CISOs, are having a tough time understanding how to make sense of that data and how to really build a risk-based approach to how they mitigate their cybersecurity risk. And that is why ImagineX focuses on pragmatic cybersecurity programs and helping CISOs, C-levels, and technology leaders make sense of their cybersecurity programs, understand their risk, understand if they're in a regulated environment, understand the regulatory compliance that's required, but also be pragmatic about where they need to invest their time, money, and personnel to reduce their risk of being hacked or being breached, which, as we know, has massive reputational risk and massive revenue impact.
Right. It really does hit the bottom line. It's not that there was a breach in the data center and internal, I can't get to my email, which is still an impact. The impact is far reaching, and it's affecting, customers in a whole number of different ways, to organization touch. One of the things I liked about that long laundry list of things that are really what the C-suite has to be considering. I like how you said you take a pragmatic approach to look at that. And it's almost like you help the C-suite make sense of cybersecurity. It's almost like I can take a deep breath. It's like, all right, yeah, all those things matter. But with ImagineX, I'm going to have advice and counsel to understand which ones in priority order I need to address. Right? It's that deep breath.
Exactly. And that's really our goal, right? In helping our customers be better. That is one way that we can take our decades of experience in technology consulting and in cybersecurity, as well as our in-depth experience with a lot of these industry-leading tools, from vulnerability management to endpoint detection and response to identity and access management to tools that are, scanning application security code. We're able to, really put that advisory mindset on, how do we help you through this transformation and the cybersecurity journey, right? What do you need to focus on? What is going to help mitigate your risks? Because you can't, we know that companies don't have unlimited budgets. And even if they did, the market for cybersecurity talent is very competitive, right? It is especially now post-COVID, there is a significant lack of expert cybersecurity personnel. I think we've seen some studies where there are millions and millions of unfilled cybersecurity roles. And so companies are having a hard time building their cybersecurity teams. And that's where ImagineX can help advise on the right team to build, fill in some of the gaps, and really advise on how best to use their tools to automate so that they can use their cybersecurity professionals in the best manner possible.
Right. And I think that's, where I look forward to our partnership between ImagineX and Thirdera so much, because on Servicenow, that's what we do. Servicenow is the platform of platforms, and there's many different ways inside of that. And it lets that workflow that's driven by those vulnerabilities and risks kind of span departments. But,
and when you talk about workflow, I mean, that is a critical piece. And a tool like ServiceNow obviously is enterprise leading, right? In terms of connecting all of your IT processes, your service management processes, your security operations. How do you build governance, risk, and compliance, especially if you're a regulated industry? It is a great tool that connects those processes together in an automated fashion so that you're minimizing when something happens or when incidents are reported. You're not wasting time in trying to connect groups and passing data back and forth to resolve issues. They're going through a process. They're receiving the right visibility to the right groups, and the right groups are being escalated to. And you also have the right audit, right? So that you can come back and retrospect and track, trace it back, and also learn how to be better, right? When you can look at metrics and key risk indicators to improve your processes going forward. And that is where the Thirdera ImagineX partnership, I think, has been really great, and will continue to deliver for our customers going forward.
Right. As I've worked in this space in ServiceNow, inside of integrated risk management, in that subset of the ecosystem, that's one of the things where ServiceNow has stood out, is that ability to kind of branch between departments. It's not pocket solution for this, a pocket solution for that, or you're still scratching your head. Well, can I take this security incident information and really share that via email?
Yeah.
Right. There's so many concerns that go with that. And ServiceNow addresses some of that with the secure data inside of it.
It does. And it even has, it has a great integration layer from an API perspective where we can connect tools like Qualys and Tanium and CrowdStrike, and we can connect those to ServiceNow so that you have data flowing all the way through the systems. That's part of the work that we do, is help to, help our customers use the right tools to cover the different areas of cybersecurity and connect them all together through an end-to-end workflow system like ServiceNow. And I guess that's why it's Workflow Wednesday, right?
Yeah, the Workflow Wednesday. And ServiceNow is that platform of platforms. One of the videos that I put out that has the most views on Now with Troy on YouTube is stepping back and saying, what is ServiceNow? It's not just a ticketing tool. It's a number of different things. It's that platform of platform. The phrase that I had used for a number of different years, and I think is still true, is it's the enterprise platform for structured work.
Yes.
And it lets you step back from, it's this product, that product. Across the organization, does work need to flow to address different needs? Mm-hmm. And that ServiceNow can fit. Can I circle back to something? Sure. As we talked about COVID and how that changed, you mentioned it in passing, how that really changed what the C-suite needs to be looking at. We had talked about that briefly. And I think your story is hopefully in some ways shared, but also unique. And I think, there are a couple of different audiences that would like to hear your experience at COVID, because not only does it hit and transform ImagineX, as we can imagine, right? But it also affected all of your clients. And here you are moving from founder to CEO, right as this stuff kind of exploded on the world and their environment. So can we talk a little bit about that experience of welcome to being the CEO of ImagineX?
Yeah, my timing has never been great, right? It's funny, when I co-founded ImagineX in late 2015, we kind of kicked off officially at the beginning of 2016, and literally I had my third child about to be born. So it was like, this is, what worse time to start your own company, right? Especially when you've spent a lot of your entire career in, big four, large corporation consulting to mid to large consulting. Now, all of a sudden, jumping into starting a brand new company, having a third child, it's like that. My timing was definitely not great. And then fast forward about 5 years, right? I officially get announced as the CEO right at the beginning of 2020, and had kind of these grand plans about driving the company into the future and achieving some pretty aggressive growth goals that we had achieved the previous couple of years. And then very quickly, 2 months later, COVID hits and the world changes. And so my role, very much pivoted from, having to take a, strategic approach to looking at the next 3 months and the next month and the next 2 weeks and the next day even. I had to manage our business with my co-founders. Luckily, thank God I had co-founders, or I don't know how we would have made it through, but we were managing the business really on a daily basis. Things were changing so quickly. I've never seen it in my 20 years. And I lived through, the 2001 kind of recession. I lived through 2007, 2008 in technology. And this was nothing like either of those previous periods. This was
the pace of change.
Everyone says the word unprecedented, and you probably heard it a million times, but wow, it is very appropriate, because we were having, clients whose essentially their industry was shut down. Travel and hospitality essentially went to zero overnight, right? And we had significant customers in those spaces that immediately had to stop work. So that had impact on us. It obviously impacted our clients even more so than it impacted us, but we had to start making very pragmatic decisions about how do we maximize our efficiencies? How do we minimize extraneous costs? How do we operate, get more with less? And how do we maintain our core? How do we, do the best we can do for our existing customers that still had some discretionary spend or still had to keep going. How do we provide them maximum value? And luckily, being a company that focuses on being better and doing the right thing for our customers, we were able to make those quick decisions that sometimes bigger companies couldn't make to help our customers. In some instances, we're being very kind of flexible with payment terms and offering consultants at the cost so that we didn't have to carry a significant bench. And knowing that when those industries bounce back, as inevitably they would, that those customers would appreciate that and would take care of us. And we're really proud that is what's happened, especially as we've come out of this. In 2021, we've seen that doing the right thing will come back and benefit us in the long term, because we're looking at our client relationships as not just what happens over the next few months, but multi-year relationships in helping them be better. And we got through the first several months. We stabilized our business. We had to shift our focus from an industry perspective. Obviously, healthcare and pharmaceuticals became a focus for us where it wasn't before. And luckily the work we were doing in cybersecurity was somewhat immune to COVID, right? And somewhat actually made more important by COVID, because everyone was now remote and everyone was now connecting to corporate networks from everywhere. And all of a sudden, now you actually increase the risk to your organization. And so cybersecurity, a lot of those initiatives actually got accelerated in COVID. And luckily, we were positioned with that expertise to be able to double down with our customers and assist them in those areas.
Right. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, change is constant. It's just part of life. And I've always pushed back on that. I say, no, if we look at history, if we look at where we're at, that's inaccurate. It's actually change is accelerating. And we've seen that in a number of different cases, but I don't think we've seen anything really accelerate that push to remote work. There's several jobs that kind of push to, I think we could do this remote work, teleworking, right? A hybrid working. And some organizations were very reluctant. It's like, well, handcuffs are on. No, I don't think so. And then COVID hit. And it's like, all right, take your computer, you're gone, you're home. We're going to figure this out overnight. Yes. And I like how you described that. There's very big blocks that you had to kind of look at internally at ImagineX. How are we going to do it? But then you were with your clients as they were going through the same thing, and I like that. It's those are really big blocks to move. Let's talk a little bit more about as that overnight transition to remote work and how that's matured over the last 2 years. The phrase that we talked about earlier that we've discussed a little bit is about an expansion of the attack surface. Right. If you describe that for a little bit, see if we can't get a layman's description. What the heck does that mean? An expansion of the attack surface.
Yeah. I mean, easily put, right? We all have heard of the Internet of Things and all these devices, right? A lot of companies have a wealth of connected devices to their networks. If you just think of it from a pure, cell phone perspective, right? Remote workers now are connecting to their networks with all these devices, right? And what this does is it just creates a bigger attack surface for hackers to attack, right? They just have more ways to get into the network. They have easier kind of phishing ways where they can send a malicious link to your cell phone that may look like it's a FedEx package, and you click on that and it looks legitimate. And because it's a personal device where you're also connecting to your corporate network, they kind of can get in via that personal angle and all of a sudden have access to your network. And then if you are not doing proactive endpoint detection and response, then significant breaches can happen. And this is where a lot of these ransomware attacks are coming from, right? And they've become at the forefront, in the news today, especially because now hackers are targeting financial institutions and critical infrastructure. So you think about Colonial Pipeline, they're kind of disabling a big portion of the economy, or impacting the supply chain, or impacting critical infrastructure. So that and it can sometimes be deadly, right? There was the first case of essentially a cyber security attack that led to a death of a child in Alabama because they attacked a hospital system, right? So it's more critical than ever now in COVID to make sure that you as a company are making sure that you are implementing the right processes, the right policies and procedures for access to your networks. You have the right tools detecting these anomalies. You're patching your vulnerabilities in your operating systems, your applications, and your networks, right? And that you are, if you're moving to the cloud, you have the right configurations, whether it be AWS or Azure or GCP, that you're putting the right pragmatic processes in place to not eliminate risk, because you can never eliminate risk, but to mitigate risk. And hackers are, look, these are a smart group, right? They will take advantage of the kind of the lack of supply of cybersecurity talent, right? Simple things like Colonial Pipeline posting all of their job openings across their cybersecurity organization can honestly give an attacker an idea that, look, they don't have a big cybersecurity team if they have all these openings. This may make them a target for attack, right? And a higher likelihood target that could pay essentially that ransomware, the ransom. So it's, yeah, and you have to be careful about what you put out there, right? You're trying to grow teams, you're trying to implement processes and procedures and implement your tools to prevent these things. And sometimes you unwittingly actually can cause them, right? So it is important to be strategic, be pragmatic about it, and think through how do you minimize your risk across your cyber program.
Right. As you talk about it, one of the ways that I've kind of described how cyber threats have changed, in the past, you hear stories about, early hackers and things, and there were some malicious attempts for sure, but there are also many stories of, frankly, just boredom. It's like, well, can I? And there's been, that's kind of this far end of that spectrum. Now, in my opinion, at least, we're on this other end of the spectrum where these attackers are predatory.
Yeah.
It's a large for-profit business. They have a tremendous amount of tools and networks where they can share information. And so we're facing a different hacker than we had, even 3 to 5 years ago.
Absolutely. And what's actually a good thing to hear, right, is recently in the news, they announced that the perpetrators of the Kaseya attack were actually identified and are now, essentially gonna face the penalties, right? There's significant criminal, yes, and in looking at that, seeing what governments, right, not only the State Department of the United States, but also international policing authorities are now coordinating to go after these cyber criminals, right? So you're correct, Troy. Gone are the days of the guy just hacking in his basement. Now these are organized groups out of Eastern Europe, out of all around the world. But international authorities are taking notice and are essentially going after the hackers. And this first, kind of win against the Kaseya perpetrators, I think, is a little bit of a kind of a warning that you're not untraceable just because you're using cryptocurrency. The governments also have a lot of resources at their disposal, and now this has become an imperative. And so this is going to help it, but private industry also has to do their part in preventing attacks on their networks, and that's why this has become such an important focus.
Right. I want to watch our time. We obviously, Shaun, as we talked about this, we knew we'd be able to just kind of talk for a long time, and I appreciate it. Let me transition a little bit more. We've got an event coming up tomorrow. We've talked about it in passing already in the time that we've had today, this intersection of risk and vulnerability. Although normally I say risk or vulnerability on this side and risk, but as those two come together, That's what we're going to have a webinar on with our teams. Talk a little bit about those two themes, and a little more about what Josh Tesaro from Thirdera and Mike Ellerhorst are going to be talking about tomorrow at that intersection.
Yeah. Look, it's critical, right? Especially when you think about traditional vulnerability management, where you're identifying weaknesses in your systems, which could be your hardware, your software, your operating systems, your procedures, your controls that can be exploited. Putting a risk-based lens on a vulnerability program is, again, it's one of the underpinnings of being pragmatic, right? Is figuring out how to sort out the important things from the noise, right? If you have millions of vulnerabilities, how do you actually prioritize and figure out what are the ones that you need to patch and you need to patch immediately, right? Are these revenue impacting systems, like critical systems, right? Or are these network printers? Are these essentially are these devices that are end of life that you can more easily retire than try to go patch, right? So it is putting a risk-based prioritization process around vulnerability management to really help create the remediation plan. Because what we're seeing now is companies they've got vulnerability management programs that are running scans and providing a lot of data, but then creating the remediation plans are very difficult. They're time consuming. And so it is really about understanding the risk tolerance of the organization, right? Are you regulated? How many of your applications are in-house? How many are hosted in the cloud? How much legacy debt do you have? How big are your teams? How skilled are your teams? What tools do you already have that are monitoring? How advanced are your processes, right? Do you have an incident response plan? Have you practiced that through a tabletop exercise? Do you have you considered the concept of zero trust networking and having a true disaster recovery system? These are all things that require this risk-based approach, and that is what Josh and Mike are going to be talking about tomorrow in a lot of detail. And it is an underpinning of being pragmatic and really helping, again, to make sense of all this data and do it in a way that minimizes corporate risk, maximizes the investment you're putting into it, and uses the critical cybersecurity expertise that you have on their teams, using them in the right, most effective way.
Right. You wove that message in there, making sense of cybersecurity. I was going to bring it up because, as you talked about, your own experience as a CEO, trying to prioritize all the things that hit you, the world changed. And there's that sense of overwhelm with that. And you talked about how you brought that pragmatic approach to yourself and how you bring that pragmatic approach to your clients you serve. In much the same way as we narrow down and look at that niche of, all right, we have a risk framework, we have these vulnerabilities. How do we go from that overwhelm of, I have a million vulnerabilities? Well, what are the 10 that need to be solved?
Correct. It's much easier to crawl before you run. And if you can, just like with everything, every problem has a solution. And if you can, it may seem overwhelming at the beginning, but if you can start to break it down into smaller pieces, those pieces are actually achievable, right? And that has always been our mantra. That's in consulting, and it's how we solve problems for our customers.
Right, indeed. Well, let me do this. Let me share a screen here just as we get towards closing. Share this desktop. And so in theory, we should be able to put this down below. You should see that. And what I want to point out is if you go to thirdera.com and go to thirdera.com/webinars, you can see the number of different webinars that Thirdera puts on, and there's several. The one that we're talking about is this crossroads of vulnerability and risk. You click this register and you come to here. Sign up, join this event, hear more about Thirdera and ImagineX and how we're really working in that intersection together. Again, that's tomorrow. So look forward to people joining that. Any comments you have on that while we've got this screen up, Shaun?
I think it's going to be a great webinar. I'm excited to hear from from my director of cybersecurity. He brings a wealth of expertise in consulting and in industry. So I think he's going to have a great point of view.
Yeah, agreed. Let me slide over one desktop here. In closing, thank you for joining with me, Shaun, on this. And this is a word from my sponsor. I work for Thirdera. I'm a client executive and cover these states. Territory always changes. But what I'd offer is, if this is intriguing, you'd like to spend some time to hear more about how Thirdera can at least hear where you could use a platform of platforms to help with your workflows. Guess what? Coffee's on me. Reach out to myself. I also have this team of Gabe Gonzalez and Connor Oplinger helping me book a meeting. And seriously, I'll send you a Starbucks gift card so we can sit down, have coffee together, and see what you're wrestling with, where you're feeling that sense of overwhelm that Shaun and I discussed a little bit, and explore how we might be able to give you that sense of, yeah, we can make sense of it, whether that's in cybersecurity with ImagineX and Thirdera or in other places of the platform. And with that, let me stop share so I can bring back to here. Shaun, thank you for taking time. I appreciate this. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it. I'd love, for us to continue doing this periodically. It was really cool.
I appreciate it. And I look forward to helping clients together and wish you the best going forward.
For sure. We're going to be meeting with some of your executives in Denver in just a few weeks. So we're obviously very excited about continuing to grow the Thirdera ImagineX relationship.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks again.
Thanks again. Take care. Thanks, Shaun.
Workflow Wednesday. Catch you next week, 9 a.m. Mountain, not 4 a.m.